Hello, everybody. Welcome to the new year, 2022. I hope it's going off pretty well for each of you. I started off with a little bit of a cold, so you might hear me being a little stuffed up. But the thing is, I am so happy to be here today because we're talking about the pursuit of happiness. And I was just we were throwing around ideas here, and I just wanted to share my coffee mug today. Actually says, "Do more of what makes you happy." One of my dear friends gave me that at my book launch, and it was just interesting because I chose the coffee, and then we talked about the topic today. Yeah, the coffee mug, and then we're talking about the topic today. So I'm so excited to be here with Kevin to talk about this thing that just came up for him in the past few weeks. And he's so excited about it that I love this kind of passion. And we're going to be kicking around live with you this idea that he has brought over to me and he's been thinking about. I just wanted to kind of kick it off before I pass it over to you, Kevin. Is like we call this the pursuit of happiness. Because this is obviously coming back to the founders of the United States. This idea of the pursuit of happiness, right? That they put that in our documents because this idea of happiness is something that's central to being human. And we've talked a couple times about that. And I think that the idea of happiness has morphed in many different ways since then. But it's also there's some things that stayed the same, right? As far as what is happiness. And we're really going to be talking about the concept today of happiness and not necessarily about the virtues of the people who created this idea of the pursuit of happiness. Without further ado, Kevin, I'd love to have you talk about this idea and how excited you are about what we're doing today.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. And what a coincidence. We did not, just for FYI, we did not plan the happiness mug situation. It was so coincidental. Happy New Year to all of you. I say Happy New Year because there's happy in it. And we start so many important things in our life with the word happy. We want happiness for ourselves. We want happiness for others. And we keep pursuing happiness. And I think we can stop pursuing it and just live it. And we want to get there. And so for me, happiness has been the most fundamental aspect of my existence, in my opinion. I have always done what makes me happy first, and then by doing that, I see that it impacts others. Like, and Amy, you said that earlier when we were talking, is happiness is contagious. And the idea that when one person is happy, the people around them feel happy. They can find happiness themselves. And so the idea was, what is happiness? How do we define it? And then over this last couple of weeks, I realized that we can expand the definition of happiness and break it down to really understand it better. And so I came up with a theory of happiness. I came up with this concept, and I just finished my first draft on it, and I'll be putting it out very soon. But the idea is happiness. When I Googled it, the definition was feeling of contentment and pleasure. That's it. That's the definition we see. And I think that definition is the outcome of happiness. It's what happiness is. It doesn't incorporate that. So first thing in the theory of happiness is I'm proposing is expanding that definition. And a phrase that my husband coined. So I asked him when in his happiest moment, and it was one of those moments where he never experienced something like that before, no anxieties, nothing. I asked him, how did you feel? And he described it as he felt extremely selfish and extremely empathetic at the same time. And when he said that, I was like, that's how it feels to me, my natural state most of the time. I am extremely selfish and extremely empathetic at the same time. And it relates, that's what happiness is. That gives us the feeling of contentment and pleasure. So like Before I talk about what the theory of happiness and further break that down, Amy, I'd love to ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
In your happiest moments, if like, would you be open to sharing one, like a story or something?
Mm. Happiest moments. You know, I actually experience when I think of my happiest moments, I think of usually accomplishments that I've
Mm,
done,
mhm,
which is very
mhm.
capitalistic of me. um,
No judgment
no
there. Yeah.
judgment, no judgment. Is is this feeling of just like here, I'll give something that I just remember like crying uncontrollably in
Mhm,
front as I was emceeing this kind of event. So I think this moment, to put it short, is that like shortly I had created this kind of like co-created this like whole thing called the Design Challenge when I was working in the government in the Better Government movement that we were co-creating, and it was supposed to bring 40 public servants through like 8 different methodologies like human-centered design, lean, agile, change management, all these different things, and it was community
mhm,
led and oriented. I had no budget, but I just had this dream, right, and to
mm,
bring public servants together to think about what could we do better and how can we learn together in community. And I had a lot of people who help mentors helping me throughout the way, and trying to modify this stuff, and it was like it seemed almost impossible because
mhm,
like with no budget and all the different things we were doing. And we finally get to the end where like they were taking real public problems the government was facing and trying to apply these concepts to
mm,
it, right?
mm,
And
mm,
so at the end, they actually were pitching their ideas in front of a panel of experts, right? And it was just incredible to be there because like to experience it because they had gone through this like 16-week journey with us and was staying there with us and was learning and growing and having this growth mindset. And I just sat there and I just was like, like just reflecting on it. I was like, oh my gosh, I was like crying and I was like, this happened, right? And like, and even though like we lost a couple of few people along the way, but at the end of the day, like it was mostly positive, right? And
mm,
people were, I even told this story to my manager's manager. Eventually after we accomplished it, we kind of did it in stealth mode for some time, but then she was like, oh my god, she called me amazing Amy, and
aw,
she hugged me and she's like, yeah, that's incredible that you did this, like why didn't you tell the story of this? And I was like, well, I was really busy like executing this,
uh-huh,
anyway. But that was a moment where I had true like this true feeling of being like I accomplished something, and it wasn't just me, it was with somebody
mm,
else, right, like you were
mm,
saying. And I can experience it in my body. It feels like this orb that's inside that's
mm,
glowing, right, so that I
mm.
know I'm proud of myself or there's happiness. So
Oh,
that's a story that just came to mind, as we were chatting.
um, yeah. So this is great. Thank you for sharing that story. And so in that story, you did you feel sense of empathy? Did you feel empathetic in that moment?
Um, I mean, I obviously did because I hadn't written my book yet, right? And so I always have a sense of empathy, but I think it was in doing this in community with others, and knowing we had 8 master classes, and we brought in the best people from across the government to teach these master classes for free, right?
Mm,
And so it was all about this feeling of giving back and knowing it
oh,
was this bigger purpose of
got it.
of what we were trying to accomplish that really drew people in.
And in that moment, did you also feel selfish?
I mean, I guess so because I'm the one who pitched this idea to the people, and I was like, okay, I'm the one who's in front wearing, like in front talking to people and just like engaging with them and just being like, I am doing in, I made this happen, right? So there is some like, um a bigger sense of being like, okay, I'm the face of this movement, right? And it was still growing at that point, you know.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. And if you see in that example, we were able to break down that in that same moment, one can be extremely selfish and extremely empathetic. And that led to that. Love the description of that glowing orb feeling. Oh my goodness. I'm getting texts now saying that this is amazing. So the glowing orb feeling gives you that pleasure of contentment and that the feeling of contentment and pleasure. And so I love, and so that's why I was like, we don't define happiness in this. And if we did, people would not feel guilty about feeling selfish and empathetic at the same time. Or that is the state that I wish people just naturally are. Most of the time, I would say about majority of my time when I'm living, I feel that feeling because I generally feel I'm a happy person. So when I understood that, and when my husband sort of coined that phrase for me, I was like, wow, that just feels right. Just feels who I am. And so then I broke that down further and started understanding. And then I came up with this hypothesis and the theory. And that's what I wrote is happy moments like that, or happy experiences, are happy because of two things: the experience and a driver or a catalyst, and happiness catalyst or a driver that is unique to each person. And there is a fundamental catalyst, a fundamental driver. I call it a driver, a fundamental driver that each person has that is required in that experience for us to feel that sense of happiness, that feeling of happiness. And that is my theory of happiness. In that, so for example, I learned that my fundamental driver, happiness can come from various sources. I'm not discounting that. There's complexities of that. But when you take all of that and break it down, and break it down to this fundamental single cell type approach, mine came down to WITA, WITA. And so for me, I was like, that makes sense, because every happy moment I've had, I've only remember my happiest birthday, and the one birthday that I fondly remember, and I write about this in the theory of happiness, is my 23rd birthday. I turned 23rd on 23rd of October, so it was that golden birthday, and it was the only time I genuinely felt happy on my birthday. And that is because though that birthday, and it was a weekend, I got to be with people who showed me love and I love. And we had experiences. We had a surprise meetup. Then we went to a restaurant, and a hibachi restaurant, and 20 of us. And then we went skydiving. And I realized if I had done any of those alone, and I have done certain experiences alone, I am not happy. I'm just bored. I'm sitting there. I'm like, okay, this is great. Even if I had gone skydiving, I wouldn't have been, unless it was with some other life. It can be with my dog. It can be with strangers. It can be people I love with. I need to share experiences with someone, and with has been such an integral part of my life. Every time I was miserable and I was depressed and I was suicidal, it was because I was alone and I was not with. In my darkest times, the parts that brought me out of those dark times was with. And so I was like, that is interesting. So we did the test with my husband as well, and to understand what his word is. And we originally started with observe. We landed on observe. And then we tested that, and we started breaking that down further. We realized observe didn't fit. It didn't feel right. And so we started breaking that down further, and we came to understand. So we learned that Paul cannot feel happy if he does not understand. He needs to understand what's happening, all the context, be in experience. And so that became and so now we're reflecting on all the moments we've been happy on. And so all the moments you've been depressed or sad, what are the things that brought you out of that? And the happy moments, why were you happy? What was the parts of it that were happy?
Sorry, could you say?
And so would love to spend, I know we're getting to time, but for next week, I would love to give an assignment to you, if you're open to it, invite you to think about your happy moments and think about what are some key words or key drivers in those moments that come up. And we could then do a live breakdown of those to see if this works. Maybe the theory is false. Maybe the theory doesn't work. It doesn't hold up to scientific scrutiny. But I want to at least put it out there because as you said, happiness breeds happiness. And honestly, if we were all happy, the world, the systems would change. We would be happier people.
You know, there's there's so much that I can probably that I can mention
Please take
about
the 2 extra minutes. I'm gonna shut up. Yeah.
like no. I mean there's just so much that I could talk about, and most of the time I think we spend a pretty good amount of time like trying to share the stage here. So maybe there's sometimes when I'm just like, oh yeah, I'm just going off and saying my thing, but this is your chance to do that. You know, so something that as you were talking about this, a few minutes before we went live, um, I wrote down some like immediate thoughts. But so the thing that I want to mention right now, and I think I can talk about the other two like later in the conversation, like when we talk, the next few weeks, is the basic definition of empathy is feeling with somebody and not for them. And that's Dr.
Hmm.
Brene Brown
Hmm.
actually mentions that. And I mentioned it in my book. So instead, I'd like to reframe it to being like feeling in the same, like walking in somebody else's shoes. I don't like that phrase when it comes to empathy. I think feeling with somebody rather than for them. So there's interesting overlap here, but like this idea of feeling with someone is so incredible. And I think we overlook this idea of, I also talk about in the book communities versus networks, right? And the idea of this networks is essentially only sees a piece of who you are, right? And it's more extractive. And I also think about like communities though see all bits of you, right? And it embraces who you are. And I think that's a layer of depth that is important here, is that like it's not just being with somebody. You need to be with someone, people that care about who you are, right? And bring you that positive energy and happiness. So I think it's not just feeling with somebody else, because if, and I'm not going to go into this whole story. Maybe next time I'll tell the story about my road trip when I was 24, right? About the same age when you were 23, is I wasn't with the right people, right? And
Hmm.
that next week, we can talk more about it, but like I wasn't with the right people, but once those people left, I was alone, and I could then be free to pursue my own happiness, right?
Mm.
You know? But I still was left with this idea, this feeling of I want to be with somebody else. And the meaning of life is to share with somebody else, right?
Hmm.
But they were not with the right people. So I think anyway, that's I mean, I didn't tell the whole story, but it's an interesting story that I don't actually share in my book, but I'd love to talk next week about it.
Yeah.
But that's what's happening with me, is like those are the things that pop up most
Yeah.
when you said with somebody else and happiness, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So that was my driver, personal, and it with could be other people's as well. But I think
Yeah.
everyone has their own like their own different one. Like Paul's isn't with his is not about with at all. For example,
Okay.
and so what I invite everyone is to bring I would love for y'all to reach out, whoever's listening, share this, because this is the episode I am so pumped about, so excited. I really think that we could potentially as a community come together and do some groundbreaking work around the pursuit around the theory of happiness. So
Yeah.
I would invite you all to think about your happiness driver. What are the happiest happy moments, your sad moments? And then we'll work together in breaking those down and see if we can get
Hmm.
there. When I
Yeah.
heard wit, it feels like a sense of identity to me. I want to wear it like a badge. And that's what got me so excited. So I'm excited to continue talking
Yes.
over this month.
Yeah, let's continue this next month. And well, it can make your the thing that you're writing by the end of the month a lot more robust and
Oh, yeah.
in engaging. So looking forward to continuing the conversation next week. Catch us almost every Tuesday. If one of us is sick, we'll let everybody know. But I'm recovering myself, and we'll see each other on Tuesdays, noon Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern time in the US and worldwide, if in whatever time that is for you. We'd love to have you join our conversation. Thank you, Holly, for all the great feedback on that and just being like, giving us
And
cool
Alex, yeah.
And who else is there? Alex? Okay.
Alex messaging us on other platforms. But yeah.
Okay. Alex. Oh, and she always listens in and she's part of our collaborative. I love her conversation as well. We need to get her on board and to like talk about the
Yeah.
pursuit of happiness. I'm sure she'd be
Absolutely.
a great guest. So anyway, love you all. Talk to you soon. Catch you next week.
Happy New Year. Bye.
Happy New Year. Bye.